Street Fighter 6 is woke. This should be obvious upon immediately booting up the game, but it's kind of amazing how the game subtly tries to push woke propaganda onto you with like some of the female character designs, this weird as hell, like cross-dressing, high-pitched weirdo announcer dude. Like Street Fighter 6 is a disaster and really represents, I think, the core problem with modern Capcom and Square Enix. Their inability to read the room and understand that nobody wants this. And my mindset, upon playing Street Fighter 6 and going through like the story mode and meeting a lot of the characters and seeing how like this stuff is utilized, it's really interesting to me because this is following the same woke playbook we've been seeing from Western studios for years, in that all of the woke content, all the stupid haircuts, all like the masculine female characters, all of them are shoved in your face in the first couple of hours or so of gameplay, while you try and get to the content that you're playing the game for, right? It's kind of remarkable with like how much they tried to push Marissa in marketing material and had her prominently be one of the first major characters you encounter in World Tour, seeing like, all the shilling they tried to do. Like, it's kind of remarkable how basically nobody plays her online, right? She's not popular. Nobody cares about her. Nobody wants to see her, right? She is a woke character that really should be rejected by everyone. And that's kind of my mindset, playing Street Fighter 6, is that like this game is undeniably woke. There's so much woke content in this game, but like because of the way the game is structured, where it's a fighting game where you play as the characters you actually like, it is very, 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 very uncommon for gamers to gravitate towards the woke characters or to gravitate towards the features that demonstrates Capcom's loyalty to the woke agenda. It's kind of remarkable. They could have made World Tour as woke as possible, but the core player base for this would never have played it because all anybody wants to do in Street Fighter is play people online. Right? This is a very, very, very good example as to how developers can shove woke content into games and just have it like rejected and ignored by the general player base. Marissa is nobody's favorite character. Nobody knows who the announcer really even is. And honestly, booting up the game, you could probably just easily just skip the opening cutscenes and never see the guy at all. You can like... It's so easy to just not engage with the woke content in Street Fighter 6. It almost feels like the vast majority of your playtime will never even like, well, you won't even really remember it exists. And like the intention of it is to normalize it and to standardize it and make it like, the common thing in the industry. But like, it's pretty obvious that people are more into like, Mai Shiranui or Elena or Juri or Chun-Li, the Marissas of the world are never, ever, 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 ever going to be like popular female designs for obvious reasons. So with that being said, like Street Fighter 6 is woke, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really amount to much. The important thing is that like we reject the woke messaging, make it very loud and clear that we don't want this, that if anything, Capcom really needs to like issue an apology about this. But at the end of the day, it's not something that ruins the game outright, because it's so subtle, because it's so like, it's so out of the way, like you're never going to engage with it and it's never going to be a prominent part of the experience for the vast majority of players. Street Fighter 6's problem is the same problem that every other fighting game has, is that there isn't really anything to do outside of online 1v1s, like there's no reason to learn the characters unless you're going to be competitive. There's no reason to do the story mode because it has nothing to do with the online features. There's no reason to like really do anything in the game at all, and like the game is kind of a scam with how it has like forces you to pay for costumes and like new characters and such with like Street Fighter 6 is objectively not a very good fighting game. Like it's been outclassed by like several other titles over the years, and I think only is relevant now because it's still so fresh and new and is not nearly on the same level of like atrocity as something like Mortal Kombat 1, for example. Street Fighter fans were actually happy with Street Fighter 6 to a certain extent because at the end of the day, it is better than 5. I think like most people kind of agreed on that to begin with. But I do have to wonder if this is going to be the last time we see like woke content in any Japanese game ever, because like clearly the times are changing. Clearly, the audience is rejecting this stuff, and clearly the developers aren't super happy with this either. They can push all the woke characters in fighting games they want. Nobody's going to play as them. They can change the lore all they want to try and pretend Bridget is trans. Like nobody's going to buy into it, like it's remarkable how little of an impact, making Japanese games woke has had on the overall quality. Street Fighter 6 hasn't really had a dip in quality because of the woke aspects. The problem with Street Fighter is the same problem that the games have had for like a very long time. Unless you're a super competitive player, you are not going to get a lot of mileage out of these games. Like that is just the reality of it. Street Fighter 6 like has problems outside of the woke content and like the character designs and like the decisions they made with like the visual presentation and just all of that. If Street Fighter really, really wants to evolve, it does need to expand stuff like World Tour. It does need to expand like, more single player content. It does need to cut back on the microtransactions. It does need to stick as a Nintendo exclusive fighting game franchise. It does need to do like, it needs to do a whole lot of steps to like kind of evolve the genre. And Street Fighter 6 is, to its credit, like a good step forward because it does seem that the characters that they're introducing through the updates, the King of Fighters characters, Ingrid, like these are like, characters that are more in line with what people actually want from the series. So it's interesting that like this game may very well be improved on and like, fixed with updates. It certainly isn't unplayable or like terrible or like completely awful. Like the problem with Street Fighter 6 is that like, if you're a fighting game fan, you do have better options. If this wasn't like a day one Switch 2 game, I probably wouldn't have been sticking with it so long. But for what it's worth, it is nice to be playing a fighting game on the console. It is nice to see that like it is tournament legal. It is nice to see it's the exact same game as the other versions. Like Street Fighter 6, like Capcom didn't seem to drop the ball on this version of the game outside of like, the first couple of days having like laggy online issues. Once you actually start playing the game, it is perfectly playable, and that is all I'm looking for out of a Street Fighter game.